Hi everyone, welcome to THT, and today we're going to talk about Daimyo midrange. So I already made a deck tech videos about Daimyo midrange, but I was with blue in set 2, and the reason why I did this is because I thought that BOBA Daimyo is, in my opinion, one of the most underrated leader in the game, and that was true in set 2, and I still think it's true in set 3 as well. This time around I decided to go for yellow version for the fact that Twilight of the Republic really brought us a lot of very strong yellow-white card, and I think that's one of the big reasons why yellow-white is currently one of the most popular color in the set. And I think it's a leader that has a lot of potential, and I don't even pretend to have found the perfect build for it. And I already think that the deck is very, very powerful. So obviously in this video you're gonna learn everything there is to learn about this deck and the reason I made the choice I've made. So at least you can get a starting point, and then from that point try to work on the deck and see what you can improve depending on your meta or depending on your own experience. So we're gonna start first with so the reason why I went for so we get into the details first, but we get first into the very basic into and the very basic is obviously the leader himself, Boba. So currently the reason Boba is, in my opinion, very strong is because of his leader ability. Basically the ability to give +1 attack to any unit with keywords is very powerful. Obviously you can combine this with any unit with ambush and make this so this ambush can kill things that are even higher. And there's certain breakpoint that you can reach thanks to the +1 attack, which are extremely key in the current meta, which we'll detail as we get into those units. It also gives +1 attack to our Sentinel units, which can also be quite powerful. And finally, of course, just a +1 attack that we play just any unit with keyword, we give +1 attack to a unit that is ready, and then we get to push more damage. So it's an ability that is not only very effective, but also very easy to use, something that we're very likely to use every single turn. The downside of Boba is leader deploy. Unfortunately, one of the biggest weaknesses of Boba is the fact that he deploys on 6. And that's definitely a significant weakness. And in my opinion, for a leader to deploy on 6 to be very strong, he really needs to have like a very powerful ability, which I think Boba does. Some of the other advantages that are a little bit more hidden on Boba is obviously the fact that he gets to wear the Boba Fett's armor, which in my opinion is one of the most powerful upgrade in the game, and is very, very powerful upgrade in the current meta. It's just that because the other Boba is banned, we don't really see that card anymore, but if you're playing BOBA Daimyo, especially in yellow, then it's obviously a great, great, great card to have in your deck. We'll get into more details as we get into it. So let's first of all start with our 2-drops. So 2-drops, obviously we get Battlefield Marine. This card is not to include in any green-white deck, so obviously it's their best 2-drop in the game. Then we get Cloud Rider. Cloud Rider is very, very strong in this deck because thanks to BOBA Daimyo's ability, we get to give him +1 attack, which means that you can ambush up to something that has 4 health, which is very, very powerful for something that only costs 2. Normally, whenever you want to have a 4 attack ambush unit, you have to pay 4 for it. But in this deck, you can have this for 2, which is incredibly, incredibly powerful. Moving on, we got Gamermoran Returner, sorry. Comes to play, can come into play as a 4/2 Sentinel. We got quite a few green units in this deck. That makes this unit very good at defending. And it gives us like the, and it's also a good combination with, so it's just a 3/2 for 2, generally speaking, just like pretty solid, generally speaking. The fact that it combined with Huang to become as 5/4 Sentinels, very powerful. A card that we sometimes when we play Wing Reinforcement, we want to find Sentinels to be defensive, and the fact that we can find a Sentinels that cost 2 can be very powerful as well. So it just is a very solid card in this particular deck, as it's often going to be a 4/2. That's going to be very, very powerful. We play 2 copies of Gamermoran Retainer. Then 2 Scanning Officers, no specific synergies in this deck. It's just such a strong card in the meta because a lot of people play a lot of Smuggle cards. Smuggle is very, very popular right now. And Scanning Officer can really mess very, very hard with people who play Smuggle cards, especially when it's played with the initiative. You play Scanning Officers, you can remove some Smuggle cards, tap down multiple resources, and completely screw their turn for only 2 resources, as well as putting a body on the board. This is just very, very strong. So Scanning Forcer is one of the best cards against Han Yellow, which is also a matchup that can be very tricky for us, because obviously because our leader comes out on 6, we're very, very fragile to a DJ deploy, can really screw us up really, really hard. Scanning Officer is a great solution to that. We play 2 in the main deck and 1 in the sideboard. It's just a really good card in the current meta. Moving on, we got 3 drops. We got an Echo-based Defender. Echo-based Defender is very strong in this deck because it comes to play as a 5/3, which means they will trade with most of the 3/5s in the game, which there's plenty of. It's a pretty aggressive card that can put a lot of pressure on the opponent, and it's a card that we can get back. It's one of the best cards we can get back from with Home 1 and also with Ewing Reinforcement. So for all those reasons, Echo-based Defender is really, really strong in this deck. There's so many ways to put it on battlefields. Always useful to get some sort of ways to get Sentinels out of Ewing Reinforcement or with Home 1 in order to stabilize the board. Then we got 1 copy of Yuang. Yuang is pretty good in this deck, obviously great in combination with the Gamma Marine Retainer and the Echo-based Defender. It's also quite good to get out of Ewing Reinforcement, especially when you can get like a Falcon. If you combine Falcon and Yuang, you can get yourself a 5/6 that can attack right away, and you can really surprise kill your opponent with that, which is pretty nice. But yeah, Yuang is just a flexible card. It's really a lot more situational, as you require in other units for his to come into play and be good. So the situational nature of the card prevents me from playing more than 1 copy, but as a one-off, it's just a really good card. Then we got obviously the resupply. We have a leader who's deployed on 6, so we really benefit a lot from being able to ramp, whether on turn 3 or on turn 4, in order to get our deployment faster. And also get to play our most expensive card, because this deck plays quite a few expensive cards. Resupply is just simply almost an auto-include in any mid-range or control deck, in my opinion. Moving on, we got 2 copies of Falcon. Falcon is not as good in this deck than it is in other in a hand deck, for example, because really in this case you really don't have a choice but to pay the Falcon tax. That's why we only play 2 copies of it, but it still is a great way to kind of close out the game in later stage of the game. It's a very good defensive card against space-based deck like Django. So we play 2 copies of it. Then we got 3 copies of Modded Cohort. So Modded Cohort is amazing in this deck. It is basically a Syndicate Lackey that costs 4 instead of costing 5. And 5/4 Ambush is extremely well positioned in the current meta. There's just so many 3/5s in the current meta. Being able to kill those and survive is just really, really strong. And if your opponent doesn't deal with it, it's going to attack the base and deal 5 damage by attacking the base. So it's just a very, very good card in this deck. I think there's no... Modded Cohort is basically just an auto-include in Django, in my opinion. I can hardly imagine a meta where this card wouldn't be good. And in current meta, it's even better. Then we got Bright Hope. Bright Hope is so good in this deck because one of the main inconveniences of Bright Hope is that a lot of units, especially when you're playing against Sabine, they have 3 health. So you can attack into your Bright Hope and survive, which means your Bright Hope buys you some time, but it doesn't really stabilize the Grand Arena. While Bright Hope in this deck actually comes out of the 3/6, which means that now when the Rebel spaceships attack into you, whether it's a Red 3, an A-Wing, or even X-Wing or something, they will die as a result. So that makes a huge, huge difference and makes your Bright Hope so much better. It's just a card that does very well also against Bossk. It's just a high health unit that can bounce you on unit, remove the enemy bounties, that kind of stuff. It's just a very well-rounded card, and it's just obviously insanely important against Django, and it's even better in this deck than it is in other decks, generally speaking. So obviously we play 3 copies. Then we can play Qi'ra, which is just a very well-rounded card. Doesn't have any specific synergy in this deck, but just a solid card that's going to help us survive, especially as the turn 5, turn 4, turn 5, so turn 3, turn 4, sorry, is usually pretty dangerous. That's because it's a moment where your opponent is going to have his leader deploy, and we're not going to have a leader deploy because it deploys on 6. So having a Qi'ra that basically kind of provide ball presence and prevents your enemies from getting completely out of control by blocking something is actually pretty significant. And we also play this, it's also a very good card against control. It's a great card to get out of Ewing Reinforcement. You play Ewing Reinforcement, and you get a Qi'ra, and you get to block the enemy Super Laser Blast, that kind of thing. This is the kind of play that is so strong against Super Laser Blast, as a way to protect yourself whenever you have a very wide board. Next, we got 1 copy of Traitorous. I always love to include like just 1 or 2 copies of Traitorous in my mid-range green decks, and the reason, especially if I don't play many upgrades, and the reason for this is because people are usually not prepared to deal with upgrades in the main deck. So having just a Traitorous that comes into play and still like a 3-drop is super impactful in almost every matchups, except maybe the control matchups. It's incredibly powerful against Django. Against Sabine, it's a little bit more like you have to be careful if the opponent has not used ECL. You might get out with Poe, but if the opponent already used ECL, then Traitorous is also going to be very strong against Sabine. So it's just a one-of. And you usually want to side it out if you expect your opponent to have brought some upgrade removal. Then we obviously got Plo Koon. So Plo Koon is incredible in this deck. In this deck because obviously he gets +1 attack thanks to Boba. So that means that he gets to ambush for 7. That means that he can kill most of the leaders in the game. That includes Anakin Skywalker, Quinlan. That includes all the 7 health leaders you can think of, like Django, all those stuff. So Plo Koon is just really strong in this deck. The only thing in which it's weaker compared to a Quinlan deck would be that your leader deploys on 6. So the fact that your leader does not deploy on 5 can sometimes make it a little bit difficult to get the coordinates that you need, because you don't have the leader deployment. But we do play a lot of units in this deck, so turning on the coordinate is not difficult, even though we don't have the leader deploy. Or sometimes we can just delay Plo Koon deployment, Plo Koon play to the next turn. It's completely acceptable as well. But it's an incredible strong card, a really good card to get out of human reinforcement as well. Then we got a Mirror Falcon, which is sort of the Plo Koon but in space. Obviously not as well casted, but it's just a solid card. It can, thanks to Boba, it can actually one-shot an enemy Fire Spray or an enemy Wristlet Raider, which is very strong, even though it does cost 6 to do that. So that's kind of the main way you can use it. The second way is just to smuggle it in very grindy matchup. Sorry. Moving on, we got Amethyst Nest. Amethyst Nest, we got 2 copies of it, and she's just really good against Django, because she's really good at bouncing off those Raider. But she doesn't only do that. The fact that she almost always gets +1 attack bonus thanks to Boba allows us to bounce everything that has 5 attack, which is very strong. So then there's just a much wider amount of different cards you can actually bounce. For example, you can bounce like a Fire Spray. You can bounce like a much wider variety of different cards, thanks to the fact that she's going up to 6 attack, thanks to Boba. And so I think she's a very solid card. I think she's specifically powerful in this deck. We also play DL44 Blasters to actually attack with her and get some even better bounce. She completes very well Han in terms of like what she can do, and that's why we love her. Then we obviously have Han Solo. Han Solo is so good in this deck because he gets 7/6 attack. That means you can come and ambush an enemy Luke Skywalker and survive, and you're not even surviving. You didn't even take any damage, so you can just swallow any leaders in the game. Han Solo is just so much better in this deck than it is in the traditional Han deck. You can't play it as early, but it just kills everything, and the fact you can pull it out of your reinforcement is so good. So then of course on 8 drops we got Home One, which is more kind of the grindiest, kind of like get a grindy. It's also a way to restore, which the deck doesn't have a way to restore without it. So, and it's just a bit more like for the grindy matchup, for the longest matchup. So Home One gets itself out as 2 copies. Then human reinforcement, of course, is absolutely essential in this deck. Getting those Amethyst Nest, getting those Han Solos, getting the combination variety of different cards. It's really good at stabilizing the game because we play so many Sentinels. So loads of Sentinels, loads of ambush. So it's a card that's going to have an absolute immediate impact on the game, and has just so many good ways to use wing reinforcement in this particular deck. Then we got a couple of flexible removals. So we got obviously our Waylay, which is obviously one of the problem with a deck that has a lot of Sentinels and a lot of ambush is that you're very arena dependent. Sometimes your opponent can play on the ground and you have everything in space, and the other way around can be true as well. So it's very important to have solo cards that are very flexible that can be used in either arena. And Whaley is one of those cards. There's also Traders, which is also helping us in terms of like a card that can be used in either arena. Hotshot DR44 Blasters is just so good in this deck. It works great with Enfisness. It's excellent with Han Solo, Reluctant Hero. It's just a solid card in general, allows us to get some very good trades, and gives us, of course, more resilience in terms of like the value we can produce from our resource pile on top of the card we have. Then obviously we get 2 copies of Boba Fett's armor. Boba Fett's armor is just incredible you play this on Boba, and your Boba basically becomes invincible. The only thing that kills Boba then is a Rival's Fall. Rival's Fall currently doesn't see a lot of play in the meta. So that means that you play this on your leader. Your leader becomes essentially invincible. It's very, very strong against Django, because then Django suddenly cannot tap down your leader anymore, which is just huge. And it's just a massive problem for them to have like this 6/9 unit that cannot be tapped down and cannot be killed. So it just keeps on just pounding you and killing you. Just very, very strong. So obviously there's upgrade removal, but upgrade removal for an upgrade that only costs 2 is not really that big of a deal. You're not really losing so much value, because your opponent plays an upgrade removal that costs like 1 or 3 and removes a card that costs 2. You're not really losing that much value if that happens. So it's just an incredible card. Obviously not as good as in the original Boba, because you have a leader that deploys on 6, so it comes into play a little bit later in the game. But it still is a very powerful card. And sometimes just even playing this card, don't forget that this card can be used on anything. You don't necessarily have to play it on Boba. And just like giving a +2/+2 to a unit, it's just very solid in general. It's not something that sometimes it's an option that you have available that you can use. With all that being said, let's do a few Mulligan here and kind of show you how I usually like to pilot the deck here. So opening hand here, this hand is pretty weak. We don't have any 3-drops, so obviously when I'm looking at my opening hand, I'm always looking for something to play on turn 1 and something to play on turn 2. In this case, we don't have anything to play on turn 2, so it's too risky of a hand, so I'm definitely going to mulligan this. Okay, there's a much better hand here. We got ourselves a Cloud Riders that can kill even something as large as like a 2/4 R2D2. We can just come into play, just deal full damage. It's pretty nice. And then we follow that up with an Echo-based Defender. So it's not a great hand, but it's a decent hand. It depends on the matchup, of course. Mulligan, okay, this hand is terrible. We're going to mulligan this. And we get into a hand that is pretty bad. Unfortunately, but we get a resupply. So we get turn 1 nothing, turn 2 resupply. It's not that bad. Try to get into that your reinforcement. Pretty passive. You wouldn't want to have it like this against aggro, but against other deck, I think it's fine. And here, no 2-drop at all, so the game doesn't like me. Just so, for reference, I'm playing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm playing 10 2-drops, so I definitely shouldn't be that unlucky here. But yeah, so now that we've explained here the core of the deck here, let's get through the let's do a couple more mulligan here. There's definitely some more information I can give you here. Okay, this is good. Turn 1 play, turn 1 supplies, turn 3 Plo Koon, or turn 3 like Bright Hope and stuff. That's a decent hand. Here in this case, I probably will mulligan. I will probably resource away the Bright Hope and the Han Solo, depending on the matchup. Anyways, let's get into the matchup, shall we? So, back to the deck here, and let's talk about the different matchup that we have. So this is my sideboard plan against Qi'ra. So against Qi'ra, as you can see, Qi'ra is a pretty bad matchup, and I think any green-black ramp decks is going to be a bad matchup for us. The reason is because they play more ramp than us, so they're more going to be more consistent, and their late game is going to be stronger than ours. And we're not really aggressive enough to really put pressure on them. So it's usually going to be a bad matchup for us. But we have a few ways to fix that after sideboard. The Spark of Rebellion, of course, to mess up with their ramp. We get the tech to make ourselves more resilience. We get the home ones to have better late game. Scanning Officers, because those decks do play some smuggle, but it's just like a way to have a 2-drop that can replace the Cloud Riders, because I feel like Scanning Officer is going to do like a better job, generally speaking, being a little bit more tanky. And then we side out, of course, the Cloud Rider, the Traitorous, the Bright Hope, and the Mulligan Core, which are mostly anti-aggro cards that are not so good against like those kind of super grindy matchups. It's not a great matchup. The good thing though, the good news is that Qi'ra and Green Black, generally speaking, doesn't see that much play in the current meta. So if you are going to get into a meta with loads of Palpatine, Qi'ra, Krennic, then just simply don't play that deck. That would be my best advice. But we have quite a few cards in the sideboard to help out in this matchup. Okay, second matchup is Bossk. So Bossk is definitely a bad matchup in the main deck, but after sideboard definitely gets significantly better. So things that we got, of course, Spark of Rebellion, of course, so much discard, Disruption with Qi'ra. The Home 1 Minion Falcon interaction, we get 3 Falcon, 3 Home 1 after sideboard, plus the Union Reinforcement. So, like, so many Falcons are just so annoying for hard control to deal with. They always come, deal damage, come back, deal damage, come back, deal damage. And there's not really any ways to deal with that. You just have to take the damage and hope you can kind of heal them back later on. So it's very, very strong. Scanning Officer, because it's a high health unit that's going to resist your opponent plays. Like, the Cloud Riders are very bad against Boss because your opponent can just play like any smuggle card on it and just ping it off and just kill it. So it's really, really bad. So we need to have like a kind of a replacement to drop, and those Scanning Officers are going to be a replacement. So it's not like he's playing any smuggle, right? But it doesn't matter. It's just a unit that has more health that will not die immediately to just I forgot the name, to a bounty and the Bossk King. And obviously Qi'ra is just very good. So overall, after the sideboard, I feel like the matchup gets a lot better. The deck feels a lot like in this matchup. After sideboard, it really feels like you're playing a hand green deck, and hand green does really well against hard control, generally speaking. So it really feels a lot better that way. You're still not as good as a hand green because hand green has this ramp abilities that is just very handy against control. But I would say overall, it does feel the matchup. It really feels very, very close to a hand green after matchup. So it really gets a lot better after sideboard. Next, we got Cad Bane. Cad Bane is kind of like a pretty balanced matchup. That I would say we have better late game than he does. So if we manage to not get too far behind the rest of the game because of Tarkin Town, usually as the late game comes out, we usually should be able to win relatively easily with because we just have such a better late game than he does. So in this case, I would definitely add in some Boba Fett's armor because Boba Fett's armor is incredible against Cad Bane. Obviously, Cad Bane is gonna have answers to it. He's gonna have upgrade removal. That's fine. That happens, you know. But as I said, he's not getting so much value at getting rid of those Boba Fett's armor. But if he doesn't get rid of them, it's almost an instant win because then the Cad Bane's ability can't be used anymore. He has a unit on the game that he can't deal with. It's just so incredibly annoying. And there's nothing in his deck that can really deal with the armor outside of the upgrade removal. So if he doesn't find the upgrade removal, you basically just win the game. So that's just very, very strong. And then we remove the Bright Hope. We remove the Traitorous because obviously after sideboard, he's going to side in all of his upgrade removal. And while it is okay in terms of value to lose above its armor to something like a Confiscate or a Dim Ring Fighters, you don't want to lose something that costs 5 resources to an upgrade removal. That's why we're siding out the Traitorous. So Han 1 Yellow is the matchup that I've been focusing a lot on, as you can expect. It's a pretty balanced matchup set with game one, but then in game one, but then after sideboard it gets a lot better for us. So one of the danger in this matchup is obviously anything related to DJ, because DJ, we don't have so many ways to kill DJ, and if he gets a DJ early, it prevents us from deploying our leaders because our leaders deploy on 6. It's usually a pretty big problem. Thankfully, we do have quite a few answers to it. We can just we have a few answers to it. We can go like Boba Fett's armor, boost something, that's 3 attack, then attack into it, or Huang, or we obviously can ambush with either a Plo Koon or I forgot the name. Obviously, one of the best card in this matchup is going to be I forgot the name. The Quartz. The Quartz is just a 5/4 ambush for 4. It's just insane in this matchup. So it really is helpful. So in this matchup, we side in the Spark of Rebellion because we're trying to discard as much those DJs. We're trying to discard as much problematic cards as possible. It's not really a matchup that is about like that is necessarily going to be like If we can remove the right card, it can really put us very far ahead. Then we cited the Qi'ra. That's also a great way to block DJ. It's another way to block DJ. We cited the tech, not necessarily because it's an amazing card, but just because I think it's better than Echo-based Defender. I think Echo-based Defender is just not super well positioned in this specific matchup. I mean, you can just trade with a 3-5, but sometimes what you do is like, he comes to play, becomes 5-3, your opponent takes the initiative, and in a 3-5 just attack into Echo-based Defender and survive. That just feel very, very bad. So instead, we're going to put the tech instead as an alternative 3-drop, because if we side out the Echo-based Defender, we're siding out Falcon, then suddenly we don't have enough 3-drops, so we need to have 3 drops to kind of fill the curve. Scanning Officer is obviously absolutely key in this matchup, and another great answers to DJ, and we obviously adding a third copies, and Boba Fett's armor is another way. So in this matchup, really, if you get to deploy your leader and put a Boba Fett's armor on it, you basically win the game, unless you're very far behind in damage, because there's just no way you can, like Han Yellow is not equipped to deal with Boba Fett's armor, not at all. So it's really, really, really strong. Not only that, it's also, there's just so much stuff going on. We just have a much better late game than he does. So if we can get to that problematic moment where DJ can happen, and you can get like very far behind from the early game, if you can reach the late game, usually going to win the game. So you're going to be the defender in that matchup, most likely. Cloud Rider is not amazing in this matchup because most things at 5 health, so Cloud Rider with his 4 attack really doesn't do much. It's not useless, but it's just better things to do. It would just need to make more space to be added, to the card to be added. Falcon is not so good in this matchup because there's simply nothing that Falcon can really kill, and we're not really so aggressive that we want to have Falcon on our side. Then against Quinlan Tarketown, we just had a bit more early game, and we remove a bit of late game because Quinlan can be very aggressive. It's a pretty good matchup. Against Sabine, we remove the Boba. It's also a pretty decent matchup. It got just so many sentinels and so many ambush that can really easily kill the stuff. Obviously, Racker Poe is always a problem. We usually remove the Boba's armor, which are easy to remove with the Poe, and usually like it's by the time we deploy on 6, the game is pretty much over one way or another. So Boba's armor doesn't really make that big of a difference because he's not really gonna try to kill our leader anyway at this stage of the game. Instead, we get the Falcon to have a bit more interaction in space, and the Qi'ra, which is just a very well-rounded card. And that's it. I think we covered all the matchups. So going back to the list, I'm going to talk about a few cards that I've strongly considered for this deck and ended up not including. And we're going to start here with Now There's 2 of them. So you can definitely build a version of this deck that can really play Now There's 2 of them, because we do play a lot of Underworld. With that being said, it does have a cost. You do have to make some changes to the deck and maybe include some cards that are not the most optimal in order to make space and in order to be able to play that. So I don't necessarily think it is the best way to go about it, but it is definitely something you can do, and something that can be quite powerful, especially to compensate the lack of speed that the deck that sometimes has. It is not going to be super consistent. You're going to have to make some sacrifices in order to make it work. But my feeling is like, even Cad Red, which is in my opinion the best deck for Now There's 2 of them by far, even that deck is going away from Now There's 2 of them. They're only playing like 2 copies instead of 3. So I don't see this card being so much better in this particular deck for this to be worth including. So you can definitely build a version of the deck that would use that card and do quite well with it, but I don't think it's necessary at all. Moving on, we got L337, which is a great card in this deck because it comes out as just a very solid card in the matchup in the meta because of it goes well against Tarketown. It's a smuggle and comes into play because he has a trait. He comes out at a 3/2 if he wants to be, or he does trigger BOBA Daimyo. So it's just a very well-rounded card. I just decided to play the Scanning Officer instead because I just thought that Scanning Officer was more important in the current meta. There's an argument of playing it instead of Garmamore and Retainer, even though I do like Garmamore and Retainer. I feel like, especially in late game, it does a lot better. But there's an argument of playing the L337 instead of Garmin on Retainer, if that's something you want to try. Next we got Surprise Strike. I just feel the deck is just not aggressive enough for Surprise Strike to be a thing. Yes, it's good with Enfys Nest, but definitely the deck is a lot slower. It is not a tempo deck like Quinlan or Han Yellow. It is definitely more of a mid-range deck. So Surprise Strike, not as important as deck it would be. It's still a very strong card and goes well with Enfys Nest, and it's still awesome with An. But I just think it's just not good enough. It's not what the deck is trying to do. And we have to be very careful. Our deck is obviously a U-Wing reinforcement deck, so we have to be careful every time we include a card that is not a unit. Then we got Cad Bane. So if you want to make the deck better against control, one thing you can do is play the Cad Banes at 3 drops. Cad Banes is gonna have the advantage of when it dies, it's gonna be able to get like 2 cards for 1, and it's really good to be able to get. We have a lot of very good 2 drops like Battlefield Marine, and it's just awesome to be able to get like a Cloud Rider out of it and completely control the board. And it's just a great card against control. So it's a card that definitely is worth including if you want to try it. If you have a very control heavy meta, which it feels like the meta is not control right now, so it feels like I didn't include it. Then we got Change of Hearts, which is a card you probably would consider if you're in a meta where there's a lot of Palpatine. As a sideboard card, it's something you would definitely consider using. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. I think it's a deck I've been playing quite a bit, and I've been enjoying it. And it's a deck that definitely I'm going to keep playing and keep trying to tweak the list and improve it. If you got any suggestion of a card that, if you played this deck, and there's any card that you feel should be part of this deck, let me know. And always eager to learn from your experience. If you like that kind of content, please like and subscribe. And yeah, it's a pretty fun deck. It's a pretty fair deck as well. It's a pretty balanced deck that does a lot of interesting things. So obviously it's a deck that I find very enjoyable. And once again, there's always the budget version is very cheap, and the deck is quite powerful whenever you play the budget. And you can play the budget version without making too much sacrifices, I feel like. Anyway, thank you so much for following that video, and I'll see you next time.